Hi, I'm a frickin' nutcase. Today, I'm out for the first ride in, many days. Mother Nature hasn't been kind to us this spring, and this has been the first even vaguely rideable day in over a week. Cold wind, rain, snow, hail, sleet, cold, wind, rain, more of that has been the last week and change. Not exactly conducive to riding. I don't mind riding in cold, I don't mind riding in wet, but I do my best to avoid riding in cold and wet. And we've definitely had a lot of that. So today, as I went through my list of topics that people have asked me about in the last couple of weeks, the one that bubbles to the top, because a while back I just drove past the M1 license course going on at one of our local colleges, is to talk about motorcycle licensing and the schemes used here in Ontario, but I think it's pretty similar to a lot of the schemes used in North America. And in a nutshell, motorcycle licensing doesn't make any sense. The reason I say that is actually pretty simple. I'm not sure what the politicians were thinking 20 years ago or so when they brought in graduated licensing. This was brought in Ontario as a response to a couple of cars full of kids into the ditch and a few people killed. And that's a lot of horrible tragedy. And definitely I think something needed to be done to try and stop that. Their answer was graduated licensing, and much to the chagrin of everybody who prefers 2 wheels over 4, they decided to apply a similar scheme for motorcycles. And what it basically means is whereas you used to get your learner's permit, take your basic parking lot once around the block test, and then away you go, there's now a second test that must be completed within 5 years of your completing your M1 exit test, which is now basically just a parking lot test. And that is a highway portion, a road portion, and a navigating the city sort of portion of road test. The problem is, and I've had a couple of my friends at work decide they want to buy bikes, and that's just great. And I've pointed them towards the taking the M1 course, which is basically the MSS course. So here in Ontario, you go and you do your written test to get your M1. It's, 40 questions on motorcycling, a few questions on signs, and some basic questions on the rules of the road, and out you go. You pass that, you get your M1, which would be your learner's permit. And there are a few restrictions on that learner's permit. You have to have 0 blood alcohol level. I guess that's a good thing just about all the time anyway, so I don't consider that much of a restriction. You can't take a passenger. Well, that seems quite reasonable. If you're still learning how to ride, you probably don't want to inflict that on somebody else. You're not allowed to drive at night, and I really didn't get that one until I did my first night ride many months later, and I realized that, driving at night is a little different. So next to no driving at night, no passengers, you're not allowed to go on any of the 400 series highways. Those are the highways with the largest speed limits here in Ontario. The ones where they're all largely 100 kilometers an hour. There's a few that are 90, but nothing over 100. And once again, I didn't completely understand that one. I don't think I'd want to start right off by jumping out onto the major highways on my first ride, but I definitely want to get some experience on them fairly quickly. But at any rate, those are the restrictions. No drinking, no driving at night, no passengers, no highway riding. And that's it. So basically you do your written test. As long as your eyes pass, if you need glasses, you got to wear your glasses, of course. And here's your license. Don't kill yourself. It's good for 90 days. So you can basically walk out of the driver's test center where you've just written your test, jump on your buddy's Hayabusa, and go for a ride. Completely legally. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a recipe for disaster. So you say, what stops somebody from basically harming themselves? I thought Ontario was a nanny state, where we like to protect you from you. And, guess how they do that? They don't do that by any sane process. They do that by what they would call capitalism. And while I'm a strong capitalist, I just don't get this. So I've been riding about 2 years, and I'm currently riding a fairly high-performance sport touring bike. earlier this spring I said, I might like to add a sport bike to my mix. So I started doing some research and I said, you know what? I'm old enough and I'm wise enough. I want a Hayabusa. And I looked around and I found a few used Hayabusas at prices that seemed reasonable. And I said, I better get a quote for insurance. So I called up my insurance agent that I've been with and said, hey, I'm thinking of buying a new bike. I'm thinking of buying a Hayabusa. And I'd like to get a quote. And they went through the normal questions of, how many miles are you going to drive a year and that sort of stuff. And then he gave me a quote. And I said, no, I wasn't planning on buying the bike from you. I just wanted insurance. And he said, no, that's the quote for, 1 season worth of insurance. It was insane. It was, basically speaking, it was the price of the bike, which made no sense. I said, are you sure? He says, well, yes, that's a super sport motorcycle, and you haven't been driving more than 5 years, so that's our quote. I mean, that was basically a no quote. Basically, he's saying, you're not insurable on that bike. And that's when I realized that this is how the Ontario government plans on keeping new riders off performance motorcycles. They plan on making sure they can't afford the insurance. Well, if you read around in some of the motorcycle forums, a lot of young guys just ride without insurance anyways. So that's absolutely no restriction to them. They're not planning on getting insurance in the first place, so making it expensive doesn't really matter. Add to that even if you do buy insurance, there are a lot of people out there that can afford that, but still don't have the wisdom not to be getting on a Hayabusa as their first bike. So that's sort of absolutely crazy. I know that a lot of the European countries, Britain in particular, have a tiered licensing system. I don't really understand it. There's Mod 1 and Mod 2 and CBT and a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm assuming it makes some vague sense once you're over there and somebody lays it out to you. But in a nutshell, it sounds like they've got restrictions based on age and experience for just how powerful a bike you can ride. And while I don't support that in any way, shape, or form, in general, the government should stay out of our affairs and let us do what the blank we want to do. Yeah, it kind of makes some sense, guys, I hate to say. So, dropping back to Ontario and how this works. So I've got 5 years now to complete my M2 exit course and get my full M, or my full motorcycle endorsement. So yeah, in those 5 years, the only restriction I've got is, I believe it's still the zero blood alcohol level. And the way I ride. I can ride anything I want, anything I guess I can afford the insurance on. At the end of that, I have to do my road test. And from what I understand, it's basically how safe are you riding on the city, and can you merge and unmerge safely on the highway sort of test. I guess it makes a lot of sense, but as a rider now with well over 20,000 kilometers in my first full season of riding, I gotta say, if I can't do those things, I would have probably given up motorcycling a long time ago, or already been involved in an accident that would have probably made me debate giving up riding anyways. So yeah, I'm not overly worried about passing this test. There is a course you can take that gives you a refresher. I don't know, I'm debating whether or not I should do that. It's not cheap. I could afford probably half a season worth of gasoline for the cost of the course. But safety is always good, and I suspect I've picked up some bad habits over the last year or so as I've matured in my riding skills. So maybe I should take the course. So yeah, that's the licensing scheme in Ontario. It basically is I guess you'd call it a two-tiered system, with little, if no, restriction on what you can and cannot do, other than the first 90 days when you're on your essentially your learner's permit. So I hope you've sort of enjoyed this semi-rant of motorcycle licensing. I think we'll find that in just about all of North America, there's a similar scheme. In fact, it might even be a more basic scheme where here's your learner's permit, go ride your Hayabusa. I don't support any sort of restrictions, but I think this is just a little silly to make the only thing that keeps new riders off powerful sports bikes being the price of the insurance. At any rate, I'm a frickin' nutcase.